All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining us for the Understanding Your True ACoS webinar. So we have a lot of girl power in the room today. So I'm Kathleen, I'm manager of customer success at Teikametrics, and I'm here with Betsy and Maddie, who are customer success managers and have worked with hundreds of sellers here at Teikametrics.
Hey guys.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining us today.
So we're really excited to get into this subject. And today we're gonna be going over understanding the impact of ACoS, ROAS, and ACoP. I know ACoS is really familiar, but the other two we'll definitely dive into too, because they're really important. And applying ACoS to business decisions. And then you should be able to answer the question like, is sponsored products working for me after this webinar? And we'll talk about evaluating the flywheel effect and making sure that that's working for you as well. So we're going to start it off with a poll just to get a feel from the audience. So let me just start this poll. All right, so what is your current ACoS? If you guys could chime in and give us a feel of what your current ACoS is, that would be awesome. And we really want to keep this webinar interactive. So just so you know, we do have team members on that are able to answer your questions. So feel free to write those in as we go on the webinar too. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like a lot of people under 25%, which is great. Few between 25 and 50. And interestingly, we have 10% of people not running sponsored products yet. It's a great time to come to a webinar so you can learn the best way to do that.
And also the best way to understand your ACoS and what you should think about is the best level of ACoS for you and your business.
Yeah, exactly. So it does look like most people are under 25%, which actually makes sense. What I've heard is an average overall is around 18%. But what we'll talk about today is, what that actually means. It's not always you want to be targeting like the lowest ACoS. It depends on what your goals are. So let's dive in.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing that information with us. As Kathleen said, we'll be really diving into what your true ACoS is and how to measure this throughout, all of your business decisions. So let's start off by walking through some advertising metrics here. Today we'll be diving into these terms. First, we'll be discussing ACoS, which is your advertising cost of sale. Next, we'll be looking at your ROAS, which is your return on ad spend. And then we'll be looking at your ACoP, which is your advertising cost of profit. So moving right into ACoS here, your advertising cost of sale. As you can see here, that's your ad spend over ad sales, and times that by 100. So this is a metric that Amazon provides, as I'm sure you are all pretty familiar with it. It's a big portion of understanding your Amazon ads. So this metric, it's important to us because it's really important to our sellers. It's important to you guys. So we're happy to be on this webinar, really diving into it and discussing it today with you. And ACoS is really your efficiency metric as it measures how efficiently you are spending money on your sponsored products advertising. So, when looking to measure your ACoS, you should really, measure this over a 30-day period with a 3-day buffer. And, ideally, the best time to measure ACoS is to determine whether or not an ad campaign is running efficiently for you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting your point about having that 3-day buffer. What I experience a lot with customers is the shock, like they have those presets week to date or month to date, and using those can make your ACoS look crazy inflated, and then customers tend to kind of freak out, think that's their real ACoS. But just make sure you have that 3-day buffer for that attribution period.
Yep.
Awesome. So there are actually a couple external factors that really influence your ACoS percentage. And the first one, and I think is the biggest factor that can influence this, is your level of competition in your product category. So if you know that you're in a pretty saturated market and there's a lot of different sellers who are selling very similar products and also running ads, so you'll need to know that you need to have ACoS be at a certain level for you to remain competitive and for you to win those better ad placements to show up above your competitors. And then the next factor that's also really important is how new your product is, because a brand new product that you just launched on Amazon typically won't have much sales history, it won't have many reviews, so you'll need to spend more in the beginning to really launch that product and give it that visibility that it needs.
Yep, and next here we have product page content. So, having really good content on your product listing page will, just improve your overall likelihood of conversion. So, this includes things like sales history, reviews, enhanced brand content, and the quality of your photos. So essentially, the better your product page content, the better chance you have of converting. And, to trickle off of that, pricing as well. So pricing is another factor that will impact your true ACoS. This relates to, things like competition and margin. You should always be aware of what your competitors' prices are and keep your margin in mind when setting your price. So, all four of these factors here are going to, impact your overall true ACoS.
So interesting for pricing, I feel like people have a hard time figuring out what their competitors' prices are. So a couple things I'll usually say is either go look at your product and see what listings come up as like similar to this product, yep, or pull your search term report and see what ASINs you're showing up for in sponsored products. So those are two tips that might help as well.
So the next metric that we want to take a deeper dive into is your ROAS, or your return on advertising spend metric. And this is calculated just from using your advertising sales over your advertising spend. And this is a really great metric to just analyze your return on your advertising investment. So it's the amount of revenue that you've generated per dollar spent on advertising. And this is one of the newest metrics available from Amazon, and you can actually view it in a lot of their new reporting reports that they've given you to access. And it's a great metric for understanding how your investment is growing and how it's returning for you. So I work with a seller who is recently started diving into sponsored products. They had previously run just a couple of catch-all campaigns, wasn't very optimized, but as we started spending more, we actually saw this return not only stay consistent, but increase over a very short period of time. So this is a great metric to also analyze your busy season and see that better ROAS number, even though you're seeing ACoS decrease.
Awesome. Next here we have your ACoP metric, which is your advertising cost of profit. So while this metric is not necessarily given to you by Amazon, it is something you will want to consider calculating on your own. It's a pretty simple calculation that ensures you are looking out for your top line while assessing your overall sponsored products advertising spend. So as you can see here, this is calculated by your ad spend divided by your total revenue. So ACoP is really, essentially your budgeting and profitability metric. And an ideal time to use ACoP is when you want to ensure that your ad spend never exceeds a certain percentage of your total revenue. So, we'll be diving into ACoP later in the webinar and how it relates to the flywheel effect and your overall success with sponsored products. Ad revenue is really just one piece of the puzzle, and it's just, this is just a glimpse of some of the important metrics to measure and look out for when, consider the overall efficiency of your sponsored products on Amazon.
Yeah, and like Maddie said, it's not a number that Amazon reports or gives you. So we can talk later about how you might find the right reports to kind of calculate this on your own and start measuring it.
Awesome. So next, let's get into the conversation of applying ACoS to your business decisions. So, to start this off, we'd like to introduce another poll here. This is our second poll, and our question we're asking you guys is, how often do you use your ACoS to make important business and advertising decisions? We're really looking forward to seeing some of these answers here.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. So if you guys can chime in, give us an idea, that'd be great to see those results. Looks like people are using them a lot, so that's great.
That's great to hear.
Pretty often, sometimes never. So if you aren't already, that 8% of you or the 23% of you that are just doing it sometimes, then hopefully we can give you some tips on how to use it more often.
Yep.
So let me close out that poll. Thanks for participating, guys.
Okay, awesome. So I think that the biggest, decision that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about your ACoS is first starting out with what's your product's margin. And this is really important because you need to know what your true margin is for the products that you're advertising before you can even understand your true ACoS. So you'll need to spend a little bit of time just understanding this metric as best as you can with doing the selling price over your cost divided by the selling price times 100 to find that number as a percentage. And also, these are typically some numbers that we see on the bottom of the screen here are, what we see for a variety of our sellers with some really low margins, some pretty decent margins, and then a lot of our sellers with really high margins, some bigger brands. And so the next business decision that you'll need to keep in mind is also what's your major overarching goal for using sponsored products. And this is definitely something that I ask whenever I'm on the phone with a seller when we're beginning our conversation of managing sponsored products is what is your overarching goal? Are you looking to launch all of your products and really just generate exposure and build awareness of your brand? Or are you just trying to grow and increase conversions with using sponsored products? But you can also use sponsored products to just drive supplemental income at a really profitable level, or to liquidate products, to just advertise as much as you can with products that is at a comfort level for you to sell through inventory before long-term storage fees and other means of liquidation like that.
Betsy, do you find that most people have like an overarching goal, or is it mostly categorized by different products they have, or could it be different for everyone?
Yeah, it can be different for everyone. I typically hear a lot of people tell me that they want profitable growth, which is a great goal to have, but I like to think of it more as a short-term goal. So if you're looking to kind of keep ad revenue the same, or to dramatically increase revenue, I want you to share that information with me so we can think about your advertising cost of sale percentage and not think about it on a profitability level. But maybe if that's your long-term goal is making these ads more profitable, then we should be chasing it in the long term and not necessarily in the first couple months starting off.
Yeah, I see that misalignment a lot. People trying to, immediately go for profit without first going through the launch or growth phase,
right,
which will just cut off your volume, and you'll never get to sort of that more volume and that growth phase.
Exactly. It is kind of an investment in the beginning. So if we can even think of this launch phase as just the beginning of your campaign, not always necessarily relating to the status of your product, but also keeping that in mind. But if your campaign is brand new and you're just launching new, mirrored campaign structure with using the Teikametrics software, then we are going to need to invest a little bit more in the beginning to really gather data and just put that product in front of as many people as possible to understand how it's going to perform.
And I would say even without if you're not using our software, you're still going to have to put an investment in there to kind of just get in the game and increase your sales rank.
Exactly.
So to kind of go with what Betsy was mentioning about the campaigns, so campaign structure is another important factor you want to consider. So diving into campaign structure specifically, we recommend that each campaign should reflect products or product lines with similar margins and objectives. For an example, like Betsy was mentioning, both profitability and launch, staying aligned with those goals.
Yeah, so when you think about the different margins of the products that you have in your catalog, you want to group similar products with similar margins and similar objectives together so that when you can evaluate your ACoS, you can understand that it's working for those products. So if you think now to yourself, oh, I need to launch this product or I'm launching this group of products, so ideally I should be chasing a higher level of ACoS. You want to have those products in the same campaign so you're not hurting the profitability of a different product.
Yeah, and another important piece of a successful campaign structure is having those ad groups. Use those ad groups to further characterize product variations. That's pretty vital to a successful campaign structure and something we definitely recommend here at Teikametrics. And in addition to that, as Betsy has mentioned before, having those matching mirrored campaign structures. So For an example, all automatic campaigns should have a, matching manual campaign with identical ad groups and products.
Yeah, and for those ad groups, sometimes I think it can be confusing because products all might have like their own characteristics, and you're almost tempted to make too many ad groups. You're not sure which one people are searching by. So if you are already running sponsored products and you're gonna reorganize to get into this correct structure, then you can always pull your search term report and go see what your customers are actually searching to figure out how you should categorize your ad groups.
Yeah, and I think you can even, if you're brand new to sponsored products, which I know a lot of our listeners are, I think you can even use a certain level of common sense and your own shopping habits to really kind of make this decision. Like I work with a seller who sells a lot of children's clothing. And when you're thinking about shopping for clothing for an infant or a toddler, you're not really as concerned with what the piece of clothing is or what the design is, but more so that it's going to fit this child. So when we designed ad groups, we focused on the size to make sure that the search terms would align with those.
Yeah. I think that's a common one. People have things that are different colors and different sizes, and they're not sure which to categorize by, but that makes a lot of sense in your example.
Yep.
Great. So now that we have, pretty optimal campaign structure with the mirrored campaigns, we have campaigns set up with based on the margin and the goal of the campaign. We can think about what are some ACoSs that are desirable to actually achieve these goals. So at Teikametrics, we've designed this chart that we give to all of our sellers as something to take away where they can now move and create their own campaigns and go after these ACoS percentages themselves. And we target a different level of the product life cycle. And not so much thinking about advertising cost of sale as if it should be the lowest possible number that you can achieve, but what's the number that you are willing to spend to really achieve these goals. So you can see here on this example that, with the same range of margins that we discussed on a few slides back, that a lot of our sellers have less than 10% margin, but we're still telling you to try to target a 20 to 50% ACoS when you're launching your products, which might seem a little bit out of the question, and why would I ever do that? But we want your products to have as much exposure as possible and for you to have the ability to really get them off the ground. And in order to do that and remain competitive, you do need to spend a little bit more to begin this process.
Yeah, I love the metrics to watch here too, just so you're not trying to measure everything in every phase, because in the launch phase, your ACoS is not going to be ideal. And this is what we use, Betsy and Maddie. Sometimes we're fully managing accounts for our clients, and we'll use these metrics and report on them if this is their goal. So it just makes it really clear what you're working towards.
Yeah, and Kathleen, we actually have a couple of good questions coming in now from our sellers. So the first question that I have says, if my products or the products in my campaigns are changing objectives, should I move them to a completely different campaign?
Yes, if there are still products like remaining in that campaign, say you have a launch campaign and a couple of the products are moving objective, then you would want to move it to a different campaign.
Right.
Would you agree in that situation?
Yeah, and I, with our expert launch program that we do at Teikametrics, where you have an expert kind of come in and tackle your campaigns and organize them based on our best practices, I tend to make these campaigns so that sellers can build off of them. And you can add new products as you are launching them and then moving them along the product life cycle. So moving them from their launch phase to the growth phase and then eventually to the profitability and liquidation phase, so that you can make sure that you're going after and assessing your ACoS in a way that's really reaching that goal.
Right. It's really important to target in a certain ACoS and objective per campaign, so that once you get to that profitable campaign, you can target a profitable ACoS. But then you'll also, like in some cases, if you do have a strict advertising budget, I've seen people like once they move things into the profitable campaign, then they can make that campaign have the most budget to sort of just spend at a profitable rate.
Yep.
Awesome. And we do have another question that I think is a good one. Maddie, do you want to?
Yeah, this is a great question. So referring to this right here, identifying a true ACoS target. So we have a great question coming in saying, how do we determine what the end range, what end range we should be on?
Yeah, that's kind of a business decision. How comfortable, like, are you conservative with your spend, or do you want to be aggressive? It definitely differs by each person that we work with. Some people are really concerned about the ACoS. Even if they're in the launch phase, they really don't want to go to that higher end of the range.
Right. And I would also think about it, where you line up on that range of gross margins. So like if we look at the 11 to 25% of gross margin under the launch phase, you kind of have a little bit more room to work with as you get closer to 25%. So we just want to help you utilize this ability that you have to work with to really get these products off the ground. But if your margin is closer to somewhere 11, 12%, then maybe that as high as you can go is only up to 35%.
Mm-hmm. It's really, I think, what you're willing to invest as well.
Right. Yep.
And then I think the last question that we have kind of relating to this would be, how long do you stay in each phase? And that kind of you have to assess that a little bit on your own and how much your products are really selling. And if you're seeing your sales kind of start to plateau in your launch phase, or you're seeing more products get launched that are very similar to yours, then you can think to move them to a growth phase. And, just thinking about it in terms of how your products would do in a traditional retail kind of sense, where now the level of brand awareness that you're starting to get kind of reaches a certain limit. Mm-hmm. And then you can think about making your ads just be more profitable for you at the end of the day. Okay, great. So now I want to dive in a little bit to what these actual stages of the product life cycle are. So I'm sure that you guys, all of our sellers, are super familiar with launching new products on Amazon and how difficult that can be, because you're starting off with such little sales history and with so few reviews, and all of these things are important factors. So, we want to help you generate as much exposure as possible, and I can't hammer this down enough, but put your products in front of a really wide audience. And in order to do that, we need to be able to spend a little bit more and really make it an advertising investment at this point in the game. And not really focusing at this time with these specific products on your bottom line profitability, but watching impressions come in and clicks and seeing that funnel start to open before we're worrying about conversions.
Yeah, I think a question or a request we get a lot is, I want to be on page one, but I also want to be profitable. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of showing you how you can do that over time, but you can't do it at the same time.
Right.
Maybe in some extreme cases, but probably not.
And maybe some really niche markets.
Yeah.
And for very specific search terms.
Awesome. So, from the launch phase, you'll be moving into the growth phase. So in this phase, we will be looking at converting that visibility from the launch phase, into direct sales. So there is some flexibility here, and it's dependent on what you're, like we discussed, what you're really willing to invest. So if you're willing to invest more, you can set a higher ACoS target. However, for an example, if you're a reseller with a, say a margin of 7%, you can look at a more conservative ACoS target, such as this, 15 to 20%, range here we have shown in the graph.
And then that brings us to the maturity phase, and where you want your ads to be as profitable as possible. And I love using a really classical example from my marketing education to think about the maturity phase, which is Cheerios television commercials. Everybody knows what Cheerios are, but they still have so many commercials that run on television. And that's because they just want to hammer down that when you're at the grocery store that you're thinking about Cheerios. And I think this is really important to think about with especially Amazon sellers, because at this point in the game, when a lot of people probably know your brand, know your products, you still want to run sponsored ads on those search terms that you're showing up for organically, so you can hammer down that just presence where you're always top of mind for your consumers. But to do this in a profitable way, where now we can focus on going after ACoS percentages that are a lot closer to your margin line, where we're looking at even under the margin line. So with every click that you're getting, you're not necessarily losing money, but you're staying top of mind with all of your consumers.
Yeah, that's funny. I also use like a classic advertising example, but for a different reason. Because I think a lot of people, once they, start getting organically placed higher, they start asking us why they should keep advertising. And my example is, if Cheerios decided to not run that TV commercial, it's not going to be a direct competitor that takes their spot in most cases.
Right.
But in this case, it is. If you decide to stop running sponsored products, then somebody who's really similar to your product is going to be placed in that top position.
Right. Yeah. And I think it also gives Amazon consumers just a good peace of mind, seeing your brand show up on multiple places on the page for when they search for a search term related to your product, and seeing that you're showing up organically is, obviously really great. But if they can see your brand name on several different pages on several different placements on that list, on that page, then they're going to have that much more confidence that you're the brand that they actually want to buy from.
Yeah, I would say, like, a lot of people have that question, and I would say, if you really want to know the answer, test it. But I would also say that we've tested that, and it drops your rank a lot if you all of a sudden cut off the sponsored products once you get to the phase.
And it's likely that a lot of these search terms that you would be competing for that are really related to your brand, or they're even exactly your brand would be the search term, they're not going to have a very high cost per click.
Right.
So it's almost worth it for you, for your bottom line, to continue showing up for these, because it's not going to be a huge expense.
Definitely.
Awesome. So, this liquidation phase here, this is a pretty unique phase. As you can see here, there's no specific range of what we recommend. So, this is a situation where you may want to, just to target stale or aged inventory to untie capital quickly. So, as you can see on the graph, that variance. So, you'll want to set your ACoS target based upon, really just how quickly you're willing to, get these products off the shelf. So, our recommendation is to start close to your margin line. And, when you need to see sales begin to increase on this product, consider increasing the ACoS targets, for the products accordingly. So this is typically used as around long-term storage fees. And advertising can be a great way to get rid of that stale inventory. Amazon is, some of you may know, Amazon is starting to, issue long-term storage fees. So, this could be a great way to move some of that inventory quickly if needed.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sure some people are aware Amazon's changing the way they do long-term storage fees. So in September, they'll start doing them monthly. So I think that's really going to force sellers to change the way they think about like forecasting and reordering. You're going to have to be like really understand your sales rate and not order too much.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a big change there. So you'll want to use this liquidation phase more, most likely in the future, because they're going to start hitting you harder.
Yeah, and I think as soon as Amazon comes out with these monthly long-term storage fees, or monthly increased storage fees, I don't know if you can call them long-term at that point, but I think that the level of competition is really just going to go through the roof, because at that point in the game, so many more people will have inventory that they're trying to get rid of, and they're just going to want to get rid of it. So
that's a good point.
Prices are probably going to skyrocket.
I hadn't considered that, but that's a great point.
It seems like right now we should be in the clear, but when we get closer to September and seeing this happen with inventory that they probably haven't well managed for this new system, we might see a really big spike in really just Amazon's advertising income. But with these bid prices going through the roof.
Now's a good time to start thinking about it, maybe putting things into this phase before that change hits.
Yeah, because that'll give you a little bit more time and room to work with maybe not chasing after those really competitive bids, but doing this process kind of slowly, which is ideally what we recommend, is testing different levels. So
yeah, you don't want to have to like start out with the dramatically targeted liquidation phase. Like if the earlier you do it, you could start out and test it down.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Awesome. We have a great question that just came in. The question is, in a growth or profit scenario, typically what percentage of total sales come from sponsored products?
That's a good question. I've heard you just want to make sure it's kind of below about 25% once you're getting to that profit phase.
That's what I see with a lot of our most mature sellers who've been selling on Amazon for a long time, is that they're using sponsored products to kind of take over that 20% of almost supplemental income that they wouldn't have gotten before.
Again, it's going to vary, because if you have a really competitive category, you might not be able to get to that 20, 25%.
Yep. These questions are great, guys. So continue to ask these questions. We'll answer them as they come up.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great segue into our next topic, which is other factors and that can influence your ACoS other than the product lifecycle, which is understanding your market. So building off of what Kathleen just said about being in a really concentrated category where you might not be able to achieve 20% of your income coming from ads, this is really important to know. So you're going to need to do your research and understand what level of competition that you are at and what you're facing. So I'm just going to carry an example through all three of these, really important parts of understanding your market. So one of the most concentrated product categories that I see on Amazon is definitely iPhone and tech accessories. So primarily iPhone cases, which is a really concentrated market on Amazon, and there's so many different sellers selling these products, and a lot of them are advertising. So knowing that and understanding that about your market, and especially if you're trying to break into this market, that you are going to need to be chasing bids that are at a higher level just because the level of competition is there. So you are going to need to have, at the end of the day, maybe not the lowest level of advertising cost of sale, because you have so many more competitors and the bid price is just so much higher. So another part of the market that's really important is the consumer's trends. So you'll need to understand when consumers are searching for specific products. So if you sell iPhone cases, you need to understand that maybe not everybody is searching for your iPhone 5 cases anymore. And because Apple released the new iPhone 8, iPhone 10. So you are going to need to either try to liquidate these products or kind of hold back on your advertising because you know that they won't sell very well. And then this will also go into understanding specifics about your product. So you are selling iPhone cases, and Apple just released the brand new 8 and 10 products. So you're going to need to know how often are they releasing new products, and how is that affecting my ability to sell my products. And you can kind of tie all three of these market components into understanding seasonality and knowing that when you're most competitive and when people are actually looking for your products, and even if what you're selling is brand new, it's what the people want, and you want to put it in front of them. So this is when you're going to need to be the most competitive, is if your products have any sort of seasonal kind of changes, being the most competitive during that time, because that's when your market is largest.
Yeah, I work with a lot of sellers that have seasonal products, and we'll always work to temporarily shift goals during that time period. So
exactly.
I think that's a great understanding your market is just so important.
Because even though your products aren't necessarily launching anymore, because they might be more more mature products, you still want to even think about it in the way that you want to drive exposure and drive just traffic to those listings during a high seasonal phase.
Exactly. Awesome. So moving on to, the next phase here is, is sponsored products working for me? So this is a question we get a lot. And a great way to measure if your sponsored products are working for you is to refer back to our advertising cost of profit, that ACoP that we discussed earlier. So remember, ACoP is ensuring that as you spend more, you see sales come in and total revenue increase. So this in turn works to ensure that our ad spend never exceeds a certain percentage of your total revenue. So our sponsored products are always showing us value. And as you can see in this graph here, efficient ad spend brings in more overall sales. So in the beginning of running sponsored sponsored ads, your ad spend is converting for you based on paid sales. But the longer you are running those sponsored products, you will see a flywheel effect and, increase not only ad revenue, but total revenue that, with a consistent level of ad spend. So while this is ideal, keep in mind that this is something that will happen over time. It's important to watch things like, traffic of sales and just have a general awareness of your brand and business to ensure that the flywheel effect is occurring. This flywheel effect is, what you can see depicted in this graph here. And so as you can see here in the graph, while this gap looks smaller in the beginning here at this, this 20%, it's actually a higher ratio compared to that 4% we see on the right hand of this graph. So this 4% here, depicts the gradual increase of total revenue with the help of consistent ad spend within your sponsored products.
Yeah, and I think, if you're using our software, you can definitely see graphs like this and find this information.
Yep.
If you're not, you can use the business report in combination with the bulk operations report to kind of calculate this on your own.
Yeah, because Amazon only records about the previous 90 days of data. Is that
Yeah.
60 days even? I'm not
So you'd
sure.
want to be saving your information, yes, because they're not going to store all of your data.
Right. Yeah, and I know we're covering a lot of topics here, guys, pretty quickly, and they're all really important for just understanding what levels you should be at to really achieve your goals. So I just want to ensure that you guys all know we will be sending a recording out within a couple business days after we've ended the webinar today. So no worries, you can all always tune back in and listen to us at your leisure.
Awesome. So, it's important to also think about additional metrics to watch. So to dive even further and make sure you always see success with your sponsored ads, it's important to watch the relevant metrics for your specific goals. So for an example, if you're in this launch phase, as we talked about earlier, you'll want to watch for metrics such as impressions and clicks. While you're in the growth phase, you might want to be looking out for metrics such as your overall sales and orders. And, in the profit phase, you'll want to look at metrics such as cost per click, conversion rate, ACoS, and if you're in the phase of liquidation, you'll want to watch your sales, orders, as well as your ACoS. So as you can see, different business objectives will result in the importance of different metrics, and it's important to keep these in mind so you're always staying aligned with your goals. There's not just one specific metric to look at to achieve and apply to your business decisions, business goals. There's a lot of different factors that, roll into these decisions, and it's important to know where you should be looking for each one. Awesome. So next, Betsy will be walking us through the flywheel effect. So as we've discussed, the flywheel effect is a result of the concept of ACoS. So, essentially when you spend more, you increase your overall revenue. So, Betsy, do you want to dive a little deeper and take us through the flywheel effect?
Yeah. So this is really what's going to lead us to seeing that increase in total revenue with maintaining a pretty consistent level of spend that Maddie showed us on that graph, where we could see advertising cost of profit go from being pretty high, around 20%, down to closer to 4%, which is really just an example, but this is how we make sure that you can achieve that for yourself. And it definitely does take some time, and it does take following not really the instructions that we're giving you here today, but really the recommendations that we're giving you for really trying to achieve the goals that you have. So this first, piece of the puzzle here and piece of the flywheel is to increase exposure for your products and your brand. So this is what you're doing basically in the launch phase of your product life cycle and even your campaign life cycle. So we want you to gain initial visibility for your products through your paid advertising, because it's the only way that you can actually pay money and invest in the long-term success of your products and your brand. And you can know that exactly the money that you're spending is working toward this. And you want to open the funnel to be as wide as you can. And this is really why we're pushing those, necessary ACoS percentages that are as high as 20 to 50% for low margin sellers, but even really just going as high as you're comfortable with going in the beginning, because it's only going to help you in the long term. And I can't stress that enough especially when I have discovery calls with sellers that are discussing that they want to be at a certain level of profitability eventually, but for us to really have an impact that is noticeable for increasing your ads, we're going to need to invest in the beginning. And what this leads to is the likelihood of those eyes turning into buyers. So we can see here that the increased visibility kind of improves the likelihood that people will actually convert to sales for your product. So if that many more people have the ability to see your product, it's only going to make it more likely that they will actually go through with the sale. So if we have the widest funnel that we possibly can, we're going to get more sales. And we can see this happen with orders, ad revenue, and an improving conversion rate. And you'll want to look at this, definitely on your ad campaign level, but also seeing this improve for your overall business with an increased number of orders, total revenue, and just your conversion rate overall. And that's what's really the biggest piece of the puzzle, is improving your rate of conversion. So even though that you're paying for these sales, you're paying for each click, you're paying for each conversion, it's only improving your likelihood of converting. And if you have a higher likelihood of converting, that's only going to help your organic sales rank, because Amazon is going to prefer you to other sellers. And it doesn't necessarily matter where those sales came from, as long as they actually happened. So if you have a better likelihood of converting for search terms that are paid, then you're going to have a higher likelihood of converting for organic search terms. And a higher sales rank with paid search is only going to give you a better organic placement. And this is where we start to see that graph that Maddie showed us on the previous slide of that increase in total revenue start to happen exponentially, where if you've maintained this cycle of putting your product in front of as many people as possible, watching those sales come in and start to be more profitable and start to impact your total revenue and improve your sales rank, that's when you see your ad spend start to return on itself, multiple times over, where now you are just doing more and you're not even necessarily paying for it at that point.
Right. I think something important too is when you're in the increased exposure phase and you're really trying to ramp things up. I've worked in one situation. I worked with a seller whose strategy was to just put in 1,000 keywords during the launch phase, the max limit in an ad group, and just launch that way. But what you're doing then is you're not taking a methodical approach to find the best keywords, and then you're not going to convert for all those keywords. You're not going to get a high conversion rate. You're never going to get to this higher rank.
Right.
So you're hurting yourself by trying to cheat. You can't really do it that way.
Right. Because that kind of goes into your level of competition. And if you're trying to bid on really category specific, really broad keywords that maybe you don't have the highest likelihood of converting for, it's only going to hurt your sales rank for those really broad category keywords. Where, if you're using a tool similar to the Teikametrics software where we're telling you exactly what's converting for you, that's what you should be spending your money on.
Right. And if you're not using the Teikametrics software, you still would want to do that auto to manual mirrored structure and use the data in your search term reports to find your keywords that have converted in the automatic campaign to move them over. That's how you avoid just stuffing a bunch of keywords in that don't convert for you.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a good question here from our sellers about how to find the long tail keywords. So we would find those, really by looking at the data that we have from what are people actually searching for in the search bar that they're finding your products, and then they're going through with the sale.
Yeah, and specifically we go from automatic, finding the keywords that work there, going to phrase, and then you might find those long tail keywords that you can add as exact from that phrase match.
Right, and those typically have a lower cost per click, and they're not necessarily competing with, other more broad, like those really expensive category keywords that I was just discussing that can hurt your sales rank. And so we have another question here from our sellers that says, what's the difference between sales velocity and conversion rate?
Sales velocity, you could still be paying for a bunch of clicks and getting sales, like a large amount of sales, but your conversion rate is lower because the percentage of sales that are actually going through from your clicks.
Right. Okay, cool. Good answer, Kathleen. And then another kind of follow-up question that we have here from our sellers, and thank you again so much for asking these questions. They're really helping us drive the conversation here because
keeping me on my toes too.
Yeah, and we're here to help you guys out. So, as many questions that you have, keep writing them in. So we have, what is a long tail keyword? So that's a really good question.
Yeah, it's just a really more long search term that's specific added as a keyword. Like if your customer put a lot of detail into what they were searching. So you show up less often, probably less impressions than a shorter, like broad keyword, but it's more specific. It'll convert more.
Yeah, so let me try to think of an example of what a long tail keyword would be. It could be like girls blue floral dress size 6, something like that, where it's really specific for what the person is searching for, and you're not going to show up necessarily as often for it, but it's going to have a lower cost per click.
Yep, and we have one more question here. Great question again. If you have the same price point for all SKUs and different designs, is it better to split the ads or include all catalog in all ads?
I would go include all catalogs in your ads.
Definitely.
Yep.
The correct one, like based on the attribute that's being searched, is going to come up. So there's really no harm, and you're only paying like per click. So it's not like you're overspending or anything.
Right. And we want you to, be able to put all of your products in front of as many people as possible. So, advertising all of them isn't necessarily going to hurt you in any way.
Yep. And another question here, guys, we got, when do you move the keywords from the automatic to the manual? Do you use the manual, exact, phrase, or broad?
I would go with phrase. So automatic campaigns are like running broad keywords.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Amazon's just choosing what is relevant to your product. So we use that instead of broad. Then when you're looking at your broad your automatic campaign results, and you find the search terms that have converted, and you can make different decisions here. If you're pretty conservative with spend, you want to wait until it has 2 or 3 conversions at least before you move it over. If you're pretty aggressive, you could wait until it has 1 conversion. It's still a little risky because there could be a one-off sale that's not repeatable. But once those convert, that's when you want to move them over to manual.
And Kathleen, would you say that if somebody's launching a brand new manual campaign or have kind of just transitioned to the mirrored campaign structure, would the first round of even those 1 conversion keywords be okay to add in the beginning and kind of see how they perform, or should we wait even in the beginning to have more conversions?
I think it still depends on your willingness to spend. You could move them over, but you're being covered on the automatic side. You're advertising all those SKUs. 1 conversion, if you are in the launch phase and your willingness is like greater to spend in that phase, then yes, you might want to move them over after 1.
Right. Okay.
And to kind of trickle on that, we have another question coming in. Do you negate exact match keyword in the automatic once it's transferred to manual?
Yes, our software does it automatically. For that reason, like you want to stop showing up for it on the automatic side so that you can control the bid on the manual side. Yeah. Otherwise, Amazon might serve you up for either one. Most likely they're going to serve you up on the manual side, but there's a chance they could serve you up for either one. So you just want to negate it on the automatic side as you move it over. Right.
It just gives us a better way to control your advertising spend, where now we can bid on those specific search terms, a lot more in a more controlled manner, like Kathleen said.
Thanks for all the great questions, guys.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to have even probably more time for Q&A at the end. So please keep the questions rolling. Like I said before, this is all about you guys, and we want to help you have the most efficient and the most successful sponsored products that you can have, whatever that means to you, if that's profitability or if it's increasing sales.
Yeah, keep the questions rolling in even as we're talking. We'll try to get to them at the end.
Woo, cool. So all of that great information that we just talked about with the flywheel effect and helping you guys reach that graph that Maddie went over, because that is the ultimate goal of advertising your products, is if we want to evaluate the flywheel effect and make sure that we can actually see this happening. So what we want you guys to do is just compare your ad spend on an aggregate kind of your entire Amazon account level, but also focusing on individual products. And as those are increasing and comparing the spend and comparing the sales and orders and making sure that you're seeing that total revenue start to increase after some time. But you can also do this by just making sure that you're incorporating your advertising spend under individual products in your profit and loss statements. So it's really being accounted for when you think about your bottom line profitability, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to help you optimize for, is to increase your profitability.
Yeah, and speaking of reports, I think a great one to look at in regards to this is, your advertised product performance report. And
that's a new one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes in really handy.
That's one of my favorites of the new ones.
Awesome, guys. Well, as we close in on, ending this webinar here, some of the takeaways we have are calculating, our first one here would be calculating ACoS, ROAS, and ACoP to evaluate advertising performance. The second here would be, applying your ACoS to your business to reach different objectives. The third takeaway we think is really, really important, measuring the success of your sponsored products advertising tailored to your business. Like we talked about, there's going to be so many different metrics you can look at. What's right for you and what's right for your business. You want to look at those specific metrics and, measure those specifics there. And then the fourth would be using the flywheel effect to evaluate your true ACoS.
All right, so like we were saying, we have a few minutes. You guys see any questions rolling in?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a bunch coming in here. The first one says, if ACoS or my current performance of ACoS is under 25%, should we increase campaign funding to increase sales?
If you mean budget, like if you're hitting your budget and you're at like an ACoS that's desirable, you should definitely increase your budget. Like you should never be hitting your budget. If you mean, should you start bidding more? That depends. Are you comfortable going higher than 25%? Are you in the launch phase or the growth phase? Is your goal aligned with that? Then you might want to.
Right. And what I even encourage my sellers when they are thinking about their daily budgets and they're thinking about their desired ACoS level, I want you to think of your ACoS as more of your budget. So thinking about the amount per sale that you're willing to spend. And if you're looking to increase sales, then maybe increasing your desired level of ACoS to somewhere closer to 30-35% to increase sales, but making sure that you're updating your daily budget to reflect that and that you're not limiting yourself with exceeding your daily budget.
That would be one of those times, say the seller who asked this question does decide to target a higher ACoS. They just want to be measuring their ROAS and seeing if that goes up as they invest more. Is that what you've been using it for, Betsy?
Yeah, definitely. Is as you increase that investment, making sure that you're seeing the same level of return. And, if you're increasing your ACoS target, making sure that you're seeing that new level of sales kind of come in, because it could be possible that maybe this is the most profitable point for
you don't always want to hire ACoS and more sales. So you would want to try that and see what your ROAS is and determine which is better for you.
And I think that's a lot of what sponsored products actually is. It's a lot of EB testing and making sure that what you're doing and what you're changing and what your goals are is actually reaching that point in desired sales volume.
Yep, we have another great question here. What different advice would you give to sellers who have competition on all of their SKUs?
It's a good question. there's basically only like a finite amount of things you can kind of play with here.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're priced appropriately. You want to make sure you're running sponsored products, obviously. Another thing you could do is, do some investigation into your competitors, finding them, like I said before, maybe from the search term report or from products that are similar to yours, or maybe you just know your competitors, and seeing what their product pages look like. For a couple reasons. The first one, see, like, do they have better images than you? Do they have like a better description using different keywords? Check out what they're doing and step up if your images are not as good, if they have enhanced brand content or something like that. And then the other thing is maybe find like a feature that your product has that your competitors doesn't, one differentiator, and make your product listing focused around that. You really want to differentiate yourself somehow.
Right.
Yeah, I have a seller who I work with very closely on, on competition. They have a lot of competition out there, and one of the things we look at is, exactly like Kathleen said, what really differentiates you from your competitors, and is that pricing, your product listing? It could be even, is your packaging. When someone goes, to Amazon, is your packaging going to stand out above these competitors? What's going to separate you from the competition? And really just, keep your competitors close and monitor them and know what they're always doing. And that's just one way to always stay ahead of the competition and make sure, you're competing.
And you want to take that differentiating factor and really kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
Like, if what you're differentiated from your competitors on is even insignificant, like, oh, we use like farm safe leather or something even silly like that, making it as prominent as possible all over your listing page, because that's what's separating you and making you different from your competitors.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we have a great question here. How does the Teikametrics software work, and what is the monthly cost?
It works basically how we were saying. Well, first you would work with, Betsy or Maddie or one of the CSMs to help you get started, structure those campaigns correctly. But then we use that explore and exploit auto to manual structure. And we use the categories that are aligned with your margins and goals to make sure you're hitting those business objectives and sort of help you along the way. If you're interested in it, I'm going to share a link in a little bit. Let me actually see if I can get that. Okay, so if you are interested in the pricing, just check out our website. It's based off of your ad spend so that we can support, smaller businesses as well as larger. The really cool thing about the demo is, there's you can actually authenticate your account. So once you get on the demo, we can show you how much wasted ad spend you have. We can show you what your campaign should be structured like and sort of do a coaching call on that demo. So it should be valuable to you as well. So I would encourage everyone to go check out our website and sign up for a free demo.
Awesome. Thanks so much for letting our listeners know that, Kathleen. We can also send out a link to join our launch list for our Teikametrics Flywheel, which is kind of the phase 2 to the sponsored products optimizer.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. So, we'll send out this link where you can learn some more information about this product, but it's really what its goal is to focus on optimizing for your bottom line profitability, which we can't hammer down enough is the most important for you guys, and it's really important for us to see you guys succeed. So we will send that out to you guys, and you can definitely sign up on that list to make sure that you're first to know from information from Alistair and the rest of the team here about the progress that we're making with that. And our next webinar will be on June 6th, where we'll focus on growing your brand with sponsored products. So you guys can also sign up to listen to some of our experts speak about this with the link that we'll send out here. Should be really interesting there, and we'll all definitely want to tune in for that.
Yeah, so I love those questions you asked, competitors and things like that. We'll definitely be discussing in this next webinar. So you definitely want to tune in. If we didn't get to any of your questions there, we'll always be answering your questions, and we'll always be having these webinars to tackle these really important topics, to look at the overall scope of your sponsored products.
Yeah, if we didn't hit on your questions today, visit our website, just use the contact us form, ask us whatever questions you have. If you want to connect with us, me and Betsy and Maddie all work with a lot of sellers, so we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, and if you're current customers, feel free to reach out using expert chat, and we can definitely answer any of the questions that you have there.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We hope you join the next one as well. And as I said, reach out. We want to talk to you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.